Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hello, everyone, and we're glad you can attend Attitude's weekly ADHD Experts webinar. Sorry we're a little late today. We had a couple technical difficulties, but they're ironed out now. Just an introductory note before we get started. If you've listened to one of our webinars before, you know we offer attendees a certificate of attendance. When the webinar ends, a post-event survey will pop up. It will list 3 questions about the quality of the webinar, followed by 3 questions titled Required for Certificate. If you'd like a certificate of attendance emailed to you, you should answer those 3 questions. If you don't want a certificate, you don't have to answer the questions, obviously. Also, one other note, today's webinar sponsor is Play Attention, Enhance Brain Health and Performance. Play Attention utilizes NASA-inspired technology to strengthen executive function and self-regulation. They will customize your plan and help you thrive at home, school, and work. Includes a lifetime membership. Learn how you can make ADHD your superpower. Click here for a free consultation or call at the hyperlink on your screen, or call 800-788-6786, or you can visit playattention.com. Mention Attitude Mag 0220 and receive 10% off your home or professional program and 1 free ADHD assessment. Attitude thanks our sponsors for supporting our webinars. Sponsorship has no influence on speaker selection or webinar content. Now for the theme of today's webinar, exercise and ADHD. There's lots of evidence that shows that exercise helps children and adults manage their symptoms of ADHD. Movement turns on the brain's attention networks and eases other symptoms of ADHD, such as hyperactivity. Physical activity also benefits the ADHD brain by elevating levels of dopamine and norepinephrine, 2 chemicals linked to attention. Studies also show that a steady diet of movement and vigorous play has a positive effect on behavior and motivation, resulting in better school performance and better self-esteem. Overall, physical activity is a go-to treatment that parents and adults can use to better their lives with ADHD. We are very happy to have Patrick LaCount here today to talk about the latest science behind the benefits of exercise for the ADHD brain. He will also give us strategies for making our exercise wish list a reality by making physical movement more achievable. Patrick is a postdoctoral fellow in the Center for Child Health, Behavior, and Development at Seattle Children's Research Institute. His work focuses on the manifestation and treatment of ADHD in adolescence and early childhood. Patrick studies how health behaviors, particularly physical exercise, can be leveraged to improve the self-management of ADHD and the health of teens and young adults with ADHD. You can ask questions of Patrick at any time during the webinar. We will try to get to as many of them as we can after his presentation. To download the presentation slides of this webinar, click the drop-down menu labeled Event Resources on the bottom left of your screen. If you do not see the Event Resources tab, you need to refresh the page. So now finally, let me turn it over to Patrick. Thanks for being here today, Patrick. I really appreciate it, and so does everyone else. Everyone's very curious about the benefits of exercise. So take it away.
No, I appreciate it. So real quick, just want to go over some disclosures as a good scientist. So first off, I am a volunteer research consultant for the How to ADHD YouTube channel. Some of y'all might know that one. I've been working with Jessica for a couple of years now, basically just helping her do the research back end on some of her videos, including one on exercise and ADHD. Also, I've received funding through an IDEA award from NIGMS, Charles Kassir Research Fellowship, and Lillian Portinger Dissertation Award. And of course, all contents are solely the responsibility of myself and do not necessarily represent the views of these agencies. So, getting into today. So, let's see. The goals for today is first talking about the benefits of exercise. there's a robust literature on the benefits of physical exercise for improving physical health. But as far as mental health, that's been getting increasing attention in recent years, and from the community at large, but also the scientific community. We're paying a little bit more attention to that. Next, I want to go into the neuropsychological factors that can make exercise particularly beneficial for those with ADHD. So we know that exercise is helpful for improving cognitive functioning. There's a robust literature on that. So why can't we just recommend that for everyone? Why should we care specifically about ADHD? Is there anything unique about that disorder and the benefits of exercise that means we could get uniquely beneficial effects? And then next we're going to go into the latest research on some of the benefits of physical exercise and ADHD. Again, this is pretty new. So what do we know about it? What's been going on with it? What is some of the work that me and my colleagues are doing? And yeah, what are the limitations? What are the future directions? And then next, getting into strategies. So what can you do? Given this information, what can I do? What can my child do? What can we do to improve our level of physical activity? Because it's no secret that most people have a hard time reaching physical activity benchmarks, and we find that can be especially hard for families, adults, children who have ADHD. There's some additional barriers there. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, so a little bit of background. So how did I get into this? So I started grad school and I played a bit of hockey in college, played all the way up through college. And then I went to grad school, I won the lottery, I got in, and I said, there's no time for this tomfoolery. I'm here to learn, I'm here to do science, let's do it. And so I wasn't exercising, I was just doing grad school. And I was in my advisor's lab, Cynthia Hardtongue, and I remember, I think about 6 months in, went into her office for kind of end of first semester check-in, and I was cracking, bursting at the seams. I don't know. I was like, I don't know what to do. And she said, okay, calm down. It's all right. World's on fire, but you're fine. It's okay. And, she said, I remember you were pretty physically active when I interviewed you. You were doing hockey, you had this Taekwondo background. What are you doing now? And I said, nothing, of course. Like, why? I don't have time for that. And she said, well, that's a problem. And, she made a point of saying, I think we should make that a goal. And I want to support that in, your overall well-being, because that's important for you. And if that foundation isn't good, you're not going to be able to handle the intense stressors of graduate school. So it just so happened that she was getting ready to start the boot camp for CrossFit. So it's kind of like an intro to CrossFit. And I joined her and her husband in that. And I've been hooked ever since. I drank the Kool-Aid. So this is a picture of some individuals from our research department, or from our psych department at the University of Wyoming. And we actually set up a workout where we could go and do that. Because later on for my dissertation, I started to wonder, okay, a lot of people report anecdotally, exercise helps me, my kid, manage ADHD or manage stress or anxiety that's co-occurring with ADHD. And I was kind of surprised to see either the quality of the research or the lack of the research that had actually been done on this question, yet so many people in the community were screaming for it. So that's what I've been dedicating a lot of my energy to recently, is exploring the benefits of physical exercise for ADHD. So diving in, yeah. So I've got some lovely comic strips. I hope you enjoy the humor as much as I do. All credit to them. Fantastic work. So physical health, like I said before, there's a robust literature that exercise improves health outcomes. Now, diet, I would say, is probably closer to 80 to 90% as far as, body composition, obesity goes. It's really hard to outwork a bad diet unless you're an elite athlete. And I've had to come to realize as I've turned 30 that I'm not an elite athlete. I can't eat the way that I used to. So you can't outwork a bad diet. So that's way more important as far as obesity goes and some other concerns such as diabetes maybe, but it's still very beneficial. But there's also been increasing attention to mental health, and this largely started in the depression, anxiety, and stress community, or what we would call internalizing problems. So when we increase someone's physical activity and therefore reduce sedentary behavior, or just how much they're at rest, we can see that reductions in anxiety, in stress, in depression. You might have heard the terms behavioral activation. So basically just means doing things. But that's our fancy research term for it. And yeah, so that's been getting increasing attention. And then even other, fields or subdomains of mental health, we've been paying some attention to. So whether that's Alzheimer's, schizophrenia, and severe mental illnesses, but also ADHD as of late. So why is that the case? So a little bit of background. The neuropsychology of ADHD, I want to spend some time talking about that. So there's 4 key brain systems implicated in how the impairments associated with ADHD manifest. So the first one is what we would call like a non-executive attention arousal. So this is, think about, why do stimulants work for ADHD? Well, because we know there's underactivation, particularly in the prefrontal cortex for individuals with ADHD. And so there's a lower resting rate arousal for those individuals. And then this is kind of the sustained attention. So being able to maintain that focus over a longer period of time. So that's one domain. The next one is executive function and cognitive control. So that includes inhibition, response inhibition. So a stimuli being in your environment and reducing the immediate impulse of engaging with that stimulus or attending to the stimulus. Working memory, so it's kind of your ability to hold on to something in your brain in the short term, maybe do a mental manipulation, so like mental math, and then producing a response. What is 3 plus 4? Next one is motivation and reinforcement. So individuals with ADHD typically have the response pattern of being very incentivized by immediate rewards. It's very salient, but those long delayed rewards, think about like kind of doing retirement. In the short term, it doesn't really give me much of a dopamine kick, but in the long run, this really benefits me. That's where we see big differences in individuals with ADHD versus neurotypical brains. And then next is kind of temporal information processing. So this is kind of like the time blindness. So the time estimation of, well, how long will this task take me, as well as just what time is it? How much time has gone by? And many of these systems are implicated in the benefits associated with physical exercise. So let's dive into that a little bit. So again, we know that physical exercise has a variety of benefits for individuals with and without ADHD across cognitive domains. But one of the things that we find is that there's so many domains that there's a robust literature showing that these executive functions, so your ability to self-regulate yourself for these long-term goals, is disproportionately affected in a positive way by physical exercise. So again, while it can have a global impact on cognitive functioning, it seems to be particularly beneficial for those executive functions, the areas implicated in a lot of ADHD-related impairment. Next is, so the neuropsychological effects seem to be greater for individuals who have a baseline like deficit. So this has been found by some research who've been looking at Alzheimer's patients who their baseline cognitive levels relative to their same age peers is a bit lower. And they found that when they do an exercise intervention, they both improve, but those with that baseline deficit actually seem to get a greater degree of improvement So we can also think about it like slopes. One slope is a little bit greater. So the degree to which they improve is larger for individuals who are a little bit below the norm. Also, brain structure and functioning. So one of the things that we know is that physical exercise is associated with an upregulation of brain-derived neurotrophic factors. Don't worry about that, just BDNF. So these are implicated in the survival of neurons, the synapse formation, and synaptic plasticity. And where that gets really exciting, maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Yeah, I'll wait for that. Don't worry, it's just foreshadowing. So that has to do with brain development, basically. And it's one of the few things you can do after your brain is fully matured in its mid to late 20s to promote neurogenesis in the brain. So keep that in mind. And then we also know that physical exercise is associated with increased dopamine and norepinephrine, which are the two primary mechanisms through which stimulant medication is thought to work and benefit those with ADHD. The degree to which it affects those is not the same, certainly not. But the fact that it's similar to those mechanisms is encouraging and leads us to wonder, well, what about exercise for those with ADHD? Let's see, Dr. Hartung, my advisor in grad school, and I published a paper in the ADHD report detailing a bit about the potential benefits for physical exercise this was for young adults with ADHD, but it generalizes for most individuals with ADHD. And then also you can check out that YouTube video that I did with Jessica. She's fantastic and is great at communicating scientific ideas. I highly encourage you to check that out, explaining why exercise can be beneficial for those with ADHD in a fun and encouraging way. So especially if you want to, do some education with your kid, I think that's a great video to check out. So getting back into it. So why ADHD? What makes this uniquely beneficial? So someone on my dissertation committee, I did a study on the short-term benefits of high-intensity exercise for college students with ADHD relative to non-ADHD peers. And one of them levied a good and hard question of why, who cares? So why don't we just tell everyone, eat better, sleep better, exercise better? We know that, Patrick. Why is this interesting? And to be fair, I hadn't thought about it that deeply. And one of the things that we talked about again in that last slide is just the disproportionate effect that it has on individuals with ADHD potentially because of the neurobiological mechanisms that it affects, the baseline cognitive functioning of individuals with ADHD versus their non-ADHD peers, as well as the executive functioning systems that are impaired among individuals with ADHD, and exercise seems to disproportionately improve in the general population. So another thing too is there's increasing literature showing that ADHD arguably is a health problem, an indicator of health problems in adulthood. Dr. Barkley and Dr. Fisher published in the Journal of Attention Disorders last year and about the correlates of ADHD to decrease or to future morbidity. And I believe it was close to 10 years life reduction, or 5 to 10. I'd have to go back to it, but it was very compelling work, and the extent to which ADHD was a predictor of these reduced life expectancy estimates versus, alcohol consumption, sedentary behavior, things like that was pretty encouraging, or not encouraging, but eye-opening. We also know that individuals with ADHD are less physically active. This has been some burgeoning research, and while in childhood it's a little bit, and we see that once we hit adolescence, we start to see that separation, and then in adulthood that gap gets even wider. So that's even work that Dr. Hartung and Judah Serrano are doing at the University of Wyoming. Shout out to them, looking at different physical activity levels of individuals with ADHD and how is that affecting outcomes. So body fat composition, bone mineral density, so how strong your bones are, your cardiovascular fitness, blood pressure, resting heart rate, things like that. And the other thing too is, again, there's literature showing that exercise has a beneficial effect for those with ADHD. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and it's nowhere near the effects of a good psychosocial intervention or well-managed ADHD medication on the average. So it's a good, like maybe complement, or for whatever reason, access, or there's personal reasons you don't want to engage in those interventions. This is something you can do that maybe will have an effect, but the evidence doesn't suggest that it's at all similar as far as the size of the effect. So right now, there's still a lot of limitations and areas for future research. So first is difference in terminology. So physical exercise versus physical activity. This is something that even in the research community, we're supposed to be very detailed oriented, and sometimes we use terms interchangeably that we shouldn't. So physical exercise is basically doing something for the purpose of improving physical fitness. So this idea of like a scheduled activity, whether that's a rec sport, going to the gym or CrossFit. And then physical activity is kind of an umbrella term. How much are you moving? And that's different if we're talking about, well, should we improve the physical activity of individuals with ADHD versus engaging in physical exercise? These are two different questions and both things that are being explored currently. The other thing is chronic versus acute effects. So my dissertation, they came in, they did, I think it was about 16 minutes of high intensity intervals on an Airdyne bike, and then they got a bit of rest and they did some computer tasks. That's an acute effect. We did that once. Versus what if they engage in a program 3 times a week over the course of 5 weeks? What happens? We still need to answer, what is the right dosage or titration for individuals with ADHD? Is it good just to recommend acute effects versus these chronic? Is it the staying on top of physical activity more important, or just doing a run before you're trying to study? Is that more important? And is there a compounding benefit to exercise? Both have been encouraging and both have been shown to be beneficial largely, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done there to clarify some things. Objective versus subjective reporting. So this is, whether somebody self-reports like, I feel better. I feel like I'm doing better versus an objective, computer task. That's been mixed in the literature. What's the intensity level? How hard should I work? This is a question we'll get to in the next ones as far as concrete recommendations, but is it more important that I do a short, really intense exercise or a long, steady exercise? Does it have to be intense? What are the answers there? There's huge variability in the mode of interventions that researchers are looking at. That can be Tai Chi, group sports, perceptual motor, water exercise. Do you know what that is? I don't. But so we're looking at it through various lenses, which is good in the sense of getting great diversity. But what makes that hard is because of that heterogeneity in the modes of exercise, it's hard to make concrete conclusions. Again, because how many times a week are they together? Is it a group activity versus individual? What's the intensity level of that exercise? Is it aerobic exercise versus resistance training, like doing squats? Theoretical mechanisms of change. So this is something, again, looking at dopamine upregulation and brain-derived neurotropic factors. And I didn't get back to BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factors. So that's one of the things that is potentially encouraging. Is this is something that might be able to yield long-term improvements rather than, we know with medication and behavioral parent training, psychosocial interventions, skill building exercise, that a lot of those effects seem to taper off pretty dramatically the second they stop. And this is something me and my colleagues have been wondering is, could exercise yield sustained long-term benefits for individuals with ADHD because we are promoting neurogenesis in the brain. We don't know. I think it's exciting, but I'm also biased. But it's exciting to be in that research. So now getting back to the limitations, underrepresentation of women. This is a general problem in most fields, but yeah, especially when it's coming to physical exercise, and I can attest to this with my dissertation, we recruited a lot more men. Men were wanting to engage in the study more than women. So, but that also tells us something if, maybe there's a reason why men are seeking this out versus women. Maybe it has a differential effect, or it's moderated by gender or sex. These are questions we're working on, and that's also why we made sure to recruit an even distribution of men and women for that study. Lack of diagnostic screening, that's just good screening criteria. Don't need to get into that. And yeah, there's just been little details on what was the control group. So comparing physical exercise to something else, if they're just sitting and they're bored, they're not doing anything, is that a representative or a good control to compare, a recess group? And then also reporting on medication status. So, great, Patrick, what can we do? And I'll preface all this that a lot of it, this is kind of the next phase of research, is we know there's some beneficial effects here, and while there's still more work to be done, how do we get this implemented in the real world? So the overall theme with these recommendations is thinking about greasing the wheels in the direction that you want to be going. So let's say increasing physical activity or exercise, and adding friction to, canceling at the last minute, bailing on your workout buddy, things like that. So you want to make it harder to not exercise, and you also want to make it easier to exercise. So what are some concrete ways you can do that? First off, accountability buddy. So if you want to play tennis with a friend, that could be a great way to do it is, if you don't show up, they can't play tennis. So you're holding both of yourselves accountable to coming to that activity. So having accountability there, having people check in on you, things like that. Preparation. So that can be setting out your gym clothes and everything the night before, sleeping in your gym clothes. You just have to roll out of bed, making your coffee. I do that. I have it set the night before, so it wakes me up. Anything that just makes it easier. So, when you're in your bed and you're like, but I still have to, did I even do laundry? Do I even have clean shorts? Like, just removing that friction and greasing the wheels. Another one is novelty. Some people like to do the same thing over and over again, but a lot of times people want things that are changed up. That's part of the reason I like CrossFit personally is it's different every time. Sometimes we're doing squats, sometimes we're doing sprints, sometimes we're doing rope climbs, sometimes it's partner workouts, and I don't have to think about what is programmed for that day. So that might be bar classes, that might be hockey drills, or, whatever else, something that's it's got some novelty to it. Or I believe there's some passes that you can buy, or like monthly subscription programs where you get like X amount of like passes to go to various types of gyms. So if you want to do Soul Cycle one day and you want to do kickboxing another day, you can kind of change things up. Another one, I think we've all fallen into this trap, start slow. It's so much more important that you're able to work out tomorrow than destroying yourself and then being out for a week. The volume is so much more important than the intensity, I would say, at this stage. So again, the volume is much more important than the intensity. It's way more important that you're building those habits of just doing steady physical activity than to, potentially injure yourself by going way too hard, putting yourself out of commission, exhausting yourself for the rest of the day and not getting that same like natural reward or that like runner's high that some people report, start slow, take it easy. And of course, if you have any medical contraindications or believe that you might have any restrictions to engaging in physical exercise, consult with your doctor. I'm not a medical professional, so yes, you should do that. However, generally speaking, physical activity is kind of a do no harm recommendation. So other one is consistency routine. This kind of gets to starting slow. It's much more important that you can try to build that consistency, that routine. Sometimes people like morning workouts. I think those people are foreign. I don't know how you do that. I personally can't. I've been trying to do it for the last couple of months, and I can't. I personally like doing it at the end of the day because it shuts my brain off. I know other people that do it at their lunch hour because it's a way to break up the monotony of the day. Figuring out basically what works for you. Don't think about other people, you. Rewarding yourself. So whether that's you get to listen to that new album, whether that's watching your Netflix show while you're on the treadmill, catching up on that podcast while you're going to walk around the park, things making it so there's just, again, a little bit more enjoyable during the task and or after the task. And the other one is tracking your activity. So Spinoza has a line where he says that reason is no match for passion. So we all know that we should probably not be eating cake. We should eat more salads, that we should be more physically active. We should sleep better. But we don't. We're not purely logical creatures. So we have to find another way. Spinoza's idea is that we have to transform reason into a passion. And I take that to mean that we have to begin to develop a great deal of passion for logical understanding. So if only we can inculcate this in a patient, a parent, a family, a child, an adult, for curiosity, to fertilize this curiosity about themselves. When we don't have any curiosity about ourselves, that's kind of a bad sign. Try to figure out ways to induce curiosity with people I work with. And one way you can do that is just tracking your activity. So I've had several patients, this isn't with exercise, but ADHD saying, I know I'm procrastinating in the moment. I keep pushing it off, and I know I'm going to regret it later, and I keep beating myself about it, but I still don't do it. Patrick, what should I do? And I can tell you, my first couple of years of grad school, that was a great question because I did not have an answer. And I still don't necessarily have an answer, but I think what's been helpful is to promote mindfulness and awareness of those decisions. So not saying you shouldn't procrastinate, but just saying if you do procrastinate, I just want you to do it mindfully. What were you feeling in that moment? What were you thinking in that moment? What are some patterns that you're noticing? Just bringing awareness to that and doing the same thing for, physical exercise, physical activity. How enjoyable was that task? How long did it take me? Was I able to sleep better afterwards? Did I feel better? Like, did I get an endorphin rush? Was I able to focus more? Or it was too intense, or I didn't like the vibe of that, 5 o'clock workout group. They seem very cliquey and I don't like that. I'm just bringing that curiosity to those tasks and not so much beating yourself up, and just trying to get some more understanding. And then finally, so if there has to be any concrete recommendations, so far evidence suggests that 30 minutes of moderate intensity or about 10 to 15 minutes of a high intensity aerobic exercise, something that gets your heart rate up, you're breathing quickly, are the most promising. However, all exercise is helpful. Don't overthink this. Don't think that if you're not on a treadmill or you're running a 5K every day, that you are failing, or if you didn't go to 5 CrossFit workouts this week, that's somehow an indication that you're dropping the ball on this. Just do something that you can do regularly, consistently, and enjoy. So wrap things up because I want to make sure we get to your guys' questions. So we talked about the benefits of exercise. Yes, there's a robust literature on physical health, but exciting new research on mental health, including things that are commonly co-occurring with individuals with ADHD. Stress, depression, anxiety are very high among adolescents and adults with ADHD in particular. So maybe it could be a nice supplement to reduce some of those things. The neuropsychological factors that can make exercise particularly beneficial. We talked about, again, affecting executive functioning domains. Improving upregulation of brain-derived neurotropic factors, norepinephrine and dopamine. And then latest research on exercise and ADHD. I'm not going to beat that over the head. And then, we talked about those strategies of how you can then take the research and apply it to the real world. So just want to say genuinely, thank you. It's a genuine privilege to serve the ADHD community, to hear what you guys are running into, barriers, things you find beneficial, rather than being in our echo chambers and ivory towers. It takes a lot of vulnerability and bravery to come in and trust a doctor to help you, to help your child at times when you might be at your worst. So thank you for your time, and I'm excited to get to your questions.
Okay, and there were plenty of them.
Great.
One about ADHD, sleep, and exercise. We all know that kids have trouble sleeping. It's pretty common, and adults as well. And how does exercise help or not help with that from the research or based on your research?
Yeah, we know that physical activity can improve sleep. So particularly initiating sleep, I'm not sure as far as restfulness. There's a lot of aspects to sleep. It's not my particular area of expertise, but I want to know more about that because I've been thinking a lot about the same things. Is we know that exercise affects the way that you eat, exercise affects the way you sleep, and those two other health lifestyle domains also have an impact on whether you're going to exercise or whether you're going to be more physically active. If you sleep more, you're probably going to make wiser decisions. So getting up and going on that run in the morning than if you got too little sleep. Or if you ate a pizza the night before versus something that's lighter, that can affect it. So we do know that it can improve that, but then it's like, okay, so it affects sleep, but then is that because of the exercise necessarily or through other mechanisms?
Right.
Long story short is that it can be helpful, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done there.
Right. One person asks, how long does the increased dopamine and norepinephrine levels generated after exercise last in the brain? Do you have?
This is really encouraging. Yeah. We don't know. This is, we've been wondering the same thing. Is we've been making arbitrary measures of when do we have participants do these tasks? When do we take these measures? Is it 30 minutes after the exercise? Is it 2 hours after the exercise? We don't know if there's like a big spike and then it drops off, or if it's gradual. We don't know. So these are really good questions. Yeah.
Right. You referenced Dr. Barkley's study about the lower life expectancy among people with ADHD. One person is, why are people with ADHD less active? Is it physiological, psychological, or both?
Physiological, psychological, or both? I mean, it's kind of like the mind-body problem, right? I mean, they're kind of wrapped up in the same because your body affects your psyche and vice versa. But I imagine a lot of it, at least what we can see, is those same executive function systems. Again, sometimes those rewards that you're hoping to reap may not be immediately present or accrued. So the easier example is if I'm trying to improve my physical fitness and I'm engaging in physical exercise, it takes a while to see the effects of that. And if that's what you're looking for individuals with ADHD, again, we talked about how salient immediate rewards are versus those long delayed rewards. It's probably a bit of that and just self-regulating, planning ahead. The time awareness, it might be, oh no, it's at 5, but now I just looked at the clock and it's 5:15. I completely forgot. Or no, I left my keys at home and I can't get into the gym without my little tag and crap. So it's a lot of kind of the same ADHD problems that individuals have to manage, manifesting in the context with ADHD.
A lot of people asking, does strength training help in terms of the benefits of exercise versus just doing aerobic? Or is combining both of them an even better solution? A lot of people asking that. So
great questions. Yeah. So I believe there's somebody in Australia actually just forwarded me a paper on resistance training strength training for, and the benefits of that for ADHD. And I believe they were positive. But I haven't read into that. Most of the work has been done on aerobic exercise. That's the one that seems to influence those neuropsychological pathways a bit more. However, like I said before, do what fits for you. I know me personally, I'm not a runner. I've tried to love it. I've really tried. It's so hard. And I'm also a strength training person, or I try to change things up. And I think doing any of those will be beneficial. Again, don't overthink this, guys. Just do what you can do and you find personally meaningful and rewarding, rather than trying to shoehorn yourself into doing, like if we found out that figure skating was the best way to improve your executive functions or to improve your fitness, I personally have a hard time with that. I'm not very good at figure skating, and I like group-based exercises and, all these things. So just do what you can. There are beneficial effects of that, but they might be some slight differences.
What about the interplay between exercise ADHD and stimulant medication? Will getting more exercise, let's say you don't respond well to stimulant medication, will that perhaps improve the response? Or for people who are doing pretty well on stimulant medication, will exercise make it perhaps more effective?
Interesting. So if you're trying a stimulant medication and you supplement and it's not working and you supplement it with exercise, could it maybe now make it work? And then if you are taking a stimulant and it's helping, could exercise make it work even more?
Right.
I think that I'm not aware of any work on that, but it's an interesting question. I imagine, again, they affect a lot of the same neurobiological mechanisms as those with stimulants. But a lot of times what might be easier is just a general comment. Talk to your doctors. A lot of patients I've worked with, I'm surprised that they'll say, well, I have this side effect. Well, have you talked to your doctor about it? It's like, no, they just recommended it and I've been taking this for 10 years. Hopefully your doctor should be receptive to any feedback like that. If I kind of want to try something else or I'm having this side effect, and you guys can have that discussion. So there's that, but also, I guess, again, back to one of those recommendations, just track it. Track what is my experience right now? What do I want to get out of exercise? Do I want to be able to calm my brain down before I start studying? Do I want to help me turn my brain off at the end of the day? Do I want to get it started? So label that and then engage in exercise and ask yourself afterwards, how did that go? How did that affect me on days when I was taking my medication versus not taking my medication? And you can kind of be your own scientist in that way. Because again, all the research we do, this is something to keep in mind, all the research we do is on the mean. It is the average of people. So just because we get these huge effects on this treatment, there's all these like little data points over here saying like, oh, look at that, it improved. That doesn't mean there might be a couple people who didn't move. Things got worse. So I really want to encourage people to think of themselves as their own little scientist, to help answer some of those questions. Yeah.
Are there, I think I know the answer, but are there any gender-specific recommendations? Someone's saying, what would be the best exercise for a teen female? But you've already mentioned that there are a lot of females haven't even been included in the study. So I know that would be probably limit any kind of response. But then there's also the whole thing of kids versus adults. I mean, is this sort of a general average, the 15 and 30 minutes you mentioned of aerobic exercise, or do we get any kind of specific recommendations as we break into different age groups, or I don't know, just ask.
Yeah, I can't really speak to as far as if there should be any differences in the mode or intensity of exercise other than just making it age appropriate. You don't, you might want to make it more of a game for a younger individual versus an adult may not want to make it quite as childish or game-like. And so, yeah, I think generally those span the age spectrum. However, I'm not aware of any research that's looked at differences, again, because this is a pretty new area of work for people in our field. And then as far as gender differences, again, there's so much work that needs to be done there. However, the one thing I would say is keeping in mind what type of exercise you might design or consider based on this for your daughter, for your son. This was actually been trying to work with some schools to get some partnerships here. And that was some feedback I got was I phrased a program that we're working on as physical exercise. And they said, I'm not sure many of the teen girls are going to want to do that. But if you did something that was like yoga or Tai Chi or wasn't group based, or like there's a lot of, maybe it's like body image stuff, bullying that can go on. We know that individuals with ADHD a lot of times can be delayed in their motor development relative to same age peers. So doing a group sport and feeling like the worst player might make it hard to go back and engage in that physical exercise. So thinking more about those factors, again, what's going to be enjoyable and palatable for your child, your boy, your girl, just that works for them. Otherwise, I'm, again, not aware of any research that would show that aerobic exercise is particularly beneficial for men versus women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone has asked, you're talking about aerobic exercise, and then someone has asked, will yoga help my child? Will I derive some of the same benefits that I'd be getting from aerobic exercise? So there have been several questions about adding yoga to an exercise menu. So I'm just asking about that.
Yeah, I think if we collapse yoga, it is more physically active than maybe just sitting and doing meditation. You might be sitting in poses and stretching. It might still have that same beneficial effect, not necessarily through the physical activity or exercise pathways, but just through traditional meditation. And we know that there's a decent enough literature there, again, that shows that it can be helpful, maybe not as a sole intervention to address all the problems that adults, teens, families encounter with ADHD, but can maybe ameliorate some of those problems. So absolutely, yeah, yoga, Tai Chi, anything like that could certainly be helpful.
Okay. Once again, back to that BDNF, I think. Anyway, are the positive effects on neurotropic factors cumulative and long-lasting? I think this is a little bit different than the other question I asked. Or is there a spike after exercise and then a return to baseline?
So, yeah, we know that exercise, regardless, so that acute effect, generally speaking, there should be an upregulation of brain-derived neurotropic factors. I'm not sure if you're engaging in activity regularly, if there's some kind of compounding effect. I imagine it's compounding in the sense that, well, if you're promoting neurogenesis over and over and over and over again, like that's just naturally compounding, but there's no like interest on top of that, I would think. But yeah, I haven't thought about that. That's a great question. Yeah.
What about, we all know that, adults and kids with ADHD do have trouble regulating emotions. There are a lot of parents asking about my kid seems to get angry very easily. Is there any research on the effect of exercise on strong emotion?
So that was something with my dissertation. Granted, this was with college students. We had a measure of emotional impulsivity. So that's kind of like the intense swings of those emotions guiding behavior. And that was actually one of our largest effects was that. And anecdotally, that's something I've heard from patients, is that it helps them, again, kind of with that stress, the anxiety, depression, ameliorate or improve those domains. So I would imagine in much the same way, and my work on my dissertation that I'm submitting here pretty soon for publication would suggest that yes, it would help that. Again, would it completely resolve the problem? I don't know. And again, that was with college students, but I would think a lot of times that physical activity can help improve emotion regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So people are asking about swimming, bicycling. I guess as long as it has that aerobic component. And mm-hmm. I guess we need to discuss, since you mentioned aerobics being sort of front and center as a good exercise. What do you mean by aerobic, I guess? Do you have to keep your heart rate up to a certain level for a certain set period of time? I guess we could, because bicycling and swimming or running or anything could be aerobic. Is aerobic.
Yeah, great question. Right. So I guess, so starting off with the aerobic aspect of things, I'm not sure why the field, I guess I could have a guess as to why the field is looking at that mostly. To be fair, I did that with my dissertation too, is just that's where most of the work has been done, is aerobic exercise. And even just in general populations, the resistance training hasn't been looked at as much as far as the extent to which it yields beneficial effects for neuropsychological functioning. So there's that. It might just be that, well, we've always done it this way, so why don't we keep doing it, which isn't good. So I think people doing this resistance training work could potentially yield some fruitful findings that help guide these sorts of questions, or answers to these questions, rather. And then the question of what is aerobic exercise. So
right.
That's I don't have a good operational term, which the kinesiologists on my team would probably get on me for. But I would think about it, anything that gets your heart rate up is steady state, moderate. So that's like 50% of your max heart rate. You can do really simple calculations of that. I think it's 120 minus your age times, so 0.50 would be 50% of your max heart rate. That's a crude estimate, but it's an estimate. And so you want to maintain that heart rate for about 30 minutes. That would be like a moderate intensity aerobic exercise. So something where you're continually moving, you're breathing more heavily, and your heart rate is increasing. Where resistance training is, it's pushing, pulling, squatting, and you might be taking breaks in between those movements rather than just continually moving for all 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. That's the way I would think about it. And then if anything, I'm not sure if this was a question, if any of those are particularly beneficial or useful, again, just getting back to the root of it, what works for you or your child, your family.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and one last thing. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. I guess you'd be a millionaire if you could answer this one, but a lot of people have exercised and stopped. Procrastination has gotten in the way. the ADHD procrastination is a big negative in terms of exercise. But perhaps what you're saying, get passionate about something and that'll keep you going, perhaps?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is a question. Yeah, this would be $1 million question. I wish I had the answer so I could get that $1 million from whoever would award me that. But
yeah,
no, our work is all good. And this has been a problem with a lot of our field that I think we're starting to address more recently is great. In a lab, this works. In a tightly controlled setting, this works.
Right.
We're paying participants to do this. When we're incentivizing them to engage in this program, it works. But then we try to do it in the real world. Nobody's doing it. People are dropping out. It's too expensive. It's too time consuming. The insurance won't cover it. So I think, and that's something that's vexed me, is how do we get, again, this is an activity that just for the general population at a whole, we're bad at. We know logically we should be more active. We shouldn't be eating that cake. Sugar really it has no beneficial value to us other than it tastes it's great. It's fantastic, objectively great.
Yeah.
But why do we know that it brings no other benefit to our life and only risk.
Right.
So how do we take this? We're already having this general health problem to a population where it's almost by definition harder to engage in these things, to change things consistently, regularly. And that's vexed me. And I think, I'm hoping to keep working on that because it's important. But I think the passion, the curiosity, drawing attention to why didn't I engage at that? Like what, problem solving, I skipped again. Like instead of beating yourself up, just, well, what went wrong? Well, I was exhausted at the end of the day. And it's really hard to get myself motivated to go home and do this and then go to the gym. It's like, okay, so what is something I can do again to grease those wheels, to reduce that friction?
Right.
I would think that's a decent way to start. But honestly, there's a lot of work to be done. I think maybe integrating it more into a school day, so it's just structured and scheduled, and that's what you do.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
But otherwise, as far as getting yourself, if you're an individual with ADHD, to then overcome those obstacles to engage in that exercise regularly, I think fostering that curiosity and attention to yourself can be meaningful.
Yeah. Well, I think the hour is up. You had great stuff, Patrick. A lot of great insights and strategies. And we really appreciate it, sharing your expertise on this. I know I got a lot out of it. I'm sure everyone else did. And thanks again, really.
Of course. No, thank you.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure.
Once again, today's webinar sponsor is Play Attention. Play Attention utilizes NASA-inspired technology to strengthen executive function and self-regulation. We will customize your plan. They will customize your plan and help you thrive at home, school, and work. Includes a lifetime membership. Learn how you can make ADHD your superpower. Click here, the hyperlink, for a free consultation or call 1-800-788-6786. Or, of course, visit playattention.com. Mention Attitude Mag 0220 and receive 10% off your home or professional program and one free ADHD assessment. We'll see you next week, everyone, when Coach Linda Walker will share her 5 secrets to productivity by understanding the ADHD brain. See you then, and have a great day.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.